I'd like to call to order the Village Board Special Meeting of October 24th, 2013, to order at 7:01 p.m. Can I please ask for a roll call?
Mayor Gunter.
Here.
The clerk's here. Trustee Addington.
Here.
Trustee Barker.
Here.
Trustee Barry.
Here.
Trustee Nero.
Here.
Trustee Scott.
Here.
Trustee Seneca is absent tonight. Manager Searle.
Here.
Assistant Manager and Public Works Director May.
Here.
Police Chief Mulhern.
Here.
Finance Director Parker.
Here.
Community Development Director Malik.
Here.
Village Engineer Nickel.
Here.
All right.
Communications Director McIntyre. IT Manager Liljeberg. He's in the
He's
booth.
in there. All right, if I can ask everybody, please rise and join with me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And agenda item number 4, and I think we've all been looking forward to this, I know from the village board and from my standpoint for this evening to listen to all the facts and information that has been put together. And it's Community Stormwater Management Committee presentation to the village board and community. I am going to, A is going to be a Community Stormwater Management Committee presentation regarding community stormwater priorities and funding options. And I'm going to ask Trustee Nero, who spearheaded this committee along with Larry McIntyre, to take it from here.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Okay. Well, again, thank you, Mayor, for allowing this committee to happen, as well as the rest of the village board. I can tell you it's been a lot of work. It's a big commitment that we all put into this, and it's been very satisfying seeing that all these residents come out, volunteer their time, and really commit as much time and effort as they did. So I couldn't be more satisfied, and I look forward to working with them again in the future, because everybody has offered to continue working on stormwater issues if you so please. So that offer's on the table, and we'll leave that up to the rest of the board and you. So with that being said, our main goal is to research community stormwater management needs and make recommendations to the entire village board, which we're going to do tonight. The committee members, as everyone knows, and some residents may not know, we're residents from the entire village. We're just from one part, they're from everywhere. From the south side, the north side, we tried to get residents from everywhere that were affected with stormwater or even not affected by stormwater issues. So that was the great part about our committee, is not everybody really had a personal involvement with stormwater. They just wanted to help out their community. So lastly, I just wanted, I want everybody to understand that this is, I think, the most important issue in Westmont right now. The question is what we're going to do now and how we're going to fund this. Residents are going to give you recommendations. Residents will be. They're going to highlight this at the end of the presentation on what they think the steps are to solve some of these problems, to tackle some of them. And I really want everybody to pay attention, to hold all comments and questions till the end so we can get through this. It shouldn't take us too long. There's a lot of information to go over. But I think what you're going to hear is going to be the first step in the right direction to solve some of these stormwater problems throughout the village. So with that being said, I'll pass it over to Larry McIntyre to get this going. Again, thanks for this opportunity. It's great to be part of something big like this, so thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Nero. My name is Larry McIntyre, Village of Westmont Communications Director, and I've also sort of been the project manager coordinating much of this Community Stormwater Committee initiative. Wanted to quickly talk through our presentation tonight and give you an outline. First, we're going to talk about stormwater management philosophy, and then we're going to go into the history of community development and weather trends, both, of course, which impacts our stormwater management needs. Then we're going to move into conventional as well as green stormwater strategies. We're going to hear a lot about green stormwater strategies tonight, and I think I know when we did a presentation within the committee, people thought it was a game changer, and so we hope it opens a lot of people's eyes to opportunities that maybe typically folks aren't thinking about. Then we're going to go into a fairly large review of the entire community, and focus on the various areas of concern and talk about prioritization. And I should mention up front that we did sort of do a ranking in the community in terms of areas of need, but as we present that tonight, we're really not going to go first, second, third, fourth. It's just a tool. It's going to be something for us to review, and of course, with new and additional information, that ranking may change. And then finally, we're going to get to project funding options. And of course, with all of the things that we have going on and the recommendations that are going to be made, none of this happens without a source of revenue. And so ultimately, all of our conversations and hard work leads to a conversation about funding. And the committee will make those recommendations. You'll hear those tonight, and also you'll have printouts in front of you with all of the recommendations so that you can follow along. Following that, we'll have public comment. So public comment, we're hoping will start after the presentation has been completed, and then we'll have board comment. What have we done? Of course, the flood in April was historic, and within a month, in the month of May, we had a community meeting here again, just like we did approximately 4 years prior to that. And right away, we formed the committee. We formed the committee, and this board approved moving ahead to address these issues. We really let the committee lead in terms of how often they wanted to meet, and everybody wanted to roll up their sleeves. And so we started meeting twice a month, and we've done that for 4-5 months now. And there was additional meetings in there as well where subcommittees got together to do additional work on their own. Did a lot of research. We reviewed the 2011 Community Stormwater Management Study as well as a lot of other materials. We had guest speakers come in on green initiatives as well as from the county. So folks did a lot of homework in creating this presentation. And next, I'd like to introduce one of our residents and committee members, Kelly Karish.
First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight and hearing what we have to say. As Larry said, we've been meeting a couple times a week, or a month, to kind of formulate this. My name is Kelly, and I'm a resident for 17, 18 years, and I've been personally affected by the flooding. So much where I'm very thankful that my husband came out tonight because it's been traumatizing in our household. We, as we started gathering as a committee, what I realized was that there were people in our committee that are not directly affected by the flood, and there are people that are in our committee that have been directly affected. But what I wanted you to know is that there's a gentleman that comes to our committee and he has no water issues. However, his water rolls off onto the people behind him. And he cares about the overall effects of his water, the water that falls from the earth and where it goes. And for him to come out of his time, all this, and to put it forth, the effort, really speaks volumes. And when I was asked to be on this committee, I have to be honest, I did not want to be on it because I thought, how can I do this when it's so personal to my house, so close to home? But then I realized it's my responsibility to, because if I don't step up and if we don't take action, our stormwater management is a community issue. We work together as a team to address these issues and towards the goal of adopting smart recommendations that will effectively address our stormwater management concerns. So we have to collectively come together and come up with solutions because the stormwater infrastructure is not adequate with the growth that we've had. And what I feel is that the underground utility is installed to provide a safe and efficient method of removing the stormwater from the village streets. And as we embrace these challenges and necessities of other utilities and infrastructure such as gas, electric, drinking water, we should be equally committed to understanding that the stormwater management is fundamentally important and the responsibility of the entire community. Today I was on the phone looking at buying a condo for my parents here in Westmont. And as I was talking to this gentleman, he was like, yes, I need to buy a house, and I'm looking in Westmont, but I'm concerned about the flooding issues. I said, please come tonight, because this is what it's about, coming up with solutions as a community that we can address these issues, because we don't want to just Band-Aid these solutions. We want to be proactive in our infrastructures and moving forward as a progressive village. And as Steve, you said, we've done a lot of work, but the excitement is that what we can see a future of Westmont, being able to handle the growth that we have, but also being able to fix the problems that we already have. And that being said, I'd like to introduce John Jagailo.
I'm John Jagailo. I live at North Hudson Street for the last 16 years. I'm currently employed by the City of Elmhurst Public Works Department. I deal with the sanitary and stormwater management system, the pipes. It is important to reiterate that the flooding issues that have been experienced in Westmont are similar to problems that have occurred throughout Northeast Illinois. Development coupled with a growing number of heavy rain events have resulted in more extensive problems in the last decade. Kind of compare our problems with Elmhurst to severe flooding issues. Over the years, I've noticed that it's not flooding curb to curb anymore. It's getting home to home. The emotions from the residents, they want something done. It's a basic infrastructure that they pay taxes on, and they want something done. They created a resident committee to look at both stormwater and sanitary issues. It took a year for a comprehensive study. So in 2011, when the study came out, the sanitary was priority, but the stormwater wasn't too much. Then came the 2013 flood in April. Now we got to hurry up and build these retention basins, and now that's on the forefront of it. Coming to terms with the cost and the funding, it's expensive. You see the bills for capital expenditures. It's expensive. In Elmhurst, they want to build 8 retention basins. Preliminary reports, it's $10.5 million. If they cannot acquire the land from the park district or school district where they want to build them, it might go up to $20 million to $30 million because they're going to have to put a lot of stuff underground. In the Burke study from the village, the numbers are about the same, and later in the presentation, you'll see. But it's something that if we wanted to have it done, it's going to cost money. Funding, Spencer will go through the options there. In Elmhurst, population of 44,000, so they could levy a tax against the residents to do it, or what they're looking in line with like a storm utility. They already have a water sewer utility because we maintain a sanitary and a water system. So even though we're 10 miles apart from Westmont to Elmhurst, we still have the issue with rainwater. And I'd like to turn it over to Bob Basin.
Good evening, Board. For those that don't know who I am, I'm Bob Gleason. I've been in this village since 1935, so I turned out to be the history member for this committee. Some of the things that I would like you to look at, and we passed this out, I put this little map on your desk. We're going to try and put this up. It's kind of large to see it all. But if you look at that little white section in the middle of the map, that was Westmont in 1921. And the rest of what you see now is what's been there for quite a long while. I live in the southeast section of Westmont. I have no water problems. That might be because of my background and knowledge of controlling water. My entire lot is waterproofed against floods. There are other lots like that. And how do I change this thing?
Arrows at the bottom.
All my notes are on the next page. Thank you. We were incorporated in 1921 with approximately 900 people. Small houses were built on the rear of their lots. They had their own septic fields, and they had their own wells, for the most part. The original boundaries have had very little change until the 1960s. There were a few small ones in the late 1950s. But from 1960 to 70, every time we annexed someone, we inherited their infrastructure storm sewers. One of the things during the investigation of this whole issue, we have found that for almost 100%, all of those systems that were accepted under the normal conditions of a 100-year storm with a 24-hour release. So the structure we have is for storms that have gotten a little bit bigger. We've had continued development until today, but from 1970 to 1980, we grew from 89,220 to 17,353, which is roughly a 50% increase in around 12 years. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the flooding that has happened in this town, and we'll start with the late 40s. That's when the village was as it was when it was first brought together. We had basement flooding and sanitary backups, which became more of a common problem, and that was determined that houses were connected to the sanitary sewer to put in their release water from their storms. Well, needless to say, there were some more bond issues issued then to correct that problem. 1967 was probably one of the most major snowstorms that I've ever seen. And those of us that were here knew that we could move around inside the village, but we could not get outside the village because there was no snow removal outside of the village. We had a major flooding in 1988. We had another one in 2006. We had one in 2008, 2010, and then we had the biblical storm of 2013. Okay. Now, throughout this, we have to understand that we've had what's called urban sprawl, and that's throughout the entire area. This has resulted in the loss of green space, which, along with increased storm activity levels and events, has contributed to the flooding concerns. How do we evolve our current stormwater management infrastructure to address our current and growing needs? We have a gentleman by the name of George Hamper that's going to address some very interesting things that we have found.
Thank you, Bob. I'm George Hamper, and I live in Newfield Manor. And Bob Fleck and I are going to be talking about the different technologies that we have available nowadays to manage stormwater. A couple of decades ago, we only had sewers and storage basins to deal with stormwater problems. But now we've got several other ideas, too. These new ideas allow a portion of the rainwater to seep into the ground or to evaporate into the air, and when that happens, it's gone. We don't have to deal with it again. That reduces the burden on the storm sewers and the storage basins that we have to work with. Now, we didn't invent these ideas on the committee. These ideas have been developing over the past 20 years or so. As developers of commercial properties have tried to find ways to reduce the cost of complying with the county stormwater ordinance. The county passed the stormwater ordinance in the early 90s, and it requires new commercial developments to limit their stormwater runoff to 1/10 of a cubic foot per second per acre. So what's trending now is that these new ideas that have been developed for commercial properties are now being applied to keep the costs down when we address the flooding problems in existing residential neighborhoods. Just to put this in perspective here, before land is developed, probably 50% of the water seeps into the soil, and about 40% evaporates into the air, and only 10% roll down the hill as stormwater runoff. But then after land is developed into an area like Westmont, which is mostly single-family homes, about 30 to 50% of the land is covered by impermeable surfaces such as pavements and roofs. And what happens is it changes the whole dynamics of it. Instead of 50% percolating down into the soil, only 35% is seeping into the soil. And instead of only less than 10% rolling down the hill, now we've got over 30% rolling down the hill in the form of stormwater runoff. Another problem that we have is that in addition to having more water to deal with, the water also peaks faster. The flow rate peaks faster because of all the sewers and curbs and gutters we have. The water gets to where it's going faster, and we have this high peak flow that we have to cover. If the sewer isn't big enough to handle that peak flow, then you have flooding. So we have these alternatives that are called green alternatives, and the simplest one is called a bioswale. Now you look at that picture there and you see that's just an ordinary roadside ditch, which is true, but it's better than curb and gutter because at least some of the water is going to seep into the soil. Now we can actually slow down the rate of flow in the bioswale by planting bigger plants, and that gives the water a little bit more time to seep into the ground or to evaporate into the air. The bigger plants help it to evaporate more. So this example here in Downers Grove, they took out the mowed grass and replaced it with bigger plants that don't have to be mowed. Now, I'll go back to that slide for a second here. Now, in this particular slide here, you see some water that's got stuck in a pond or a puddle there. Now, that's actually a good thing because that water is never going to go downhill and contribute to flooding in residential areas. It's stuck there. It can't go anywhere. It's only got two choices. It can seep into the ground or it can evaporate into the air, but it can't move from that location. So we can take that idea a step further and create a rain garden where we create a depression or a hole, and it's about 6 inches deep, and in this example it's about 100 to 300 square feet, and the idea is to create a big puddle and store water in there that gets trapped, and it'll stay there until it either seeps into the ground or evaporates into the air. Now, this has a certain capacity, and after it fills up that capacity, the overflow is going to go downhill someplace. But in a recent project in Hinsdale, they took it a step further, and they have a rain garden here, just like on the previous slide, but instead of overflowing downhill, it overflows into this inlet pipe, and the inlet pipe drops the water down to the infiltration trench below. Now, an infiltration trench is a trench that's filled with stones that are about the size of billiard balls. So there's a lot of space in between these rocks where the water can accumulate, and it can sit there until it percolates down into the soil below the infiltration trench. This project in Hinsdale had maybe 20 of these infiltration trenches, pretty much under the rain gardens. Now, another thing you can do is take that same infiltration trench and use that as the base course of a road. So this is a road in Downers Grove, and the infiltration trench goes from curb to curb and all the way down the end of this picture. It's a block or two. So that's a really big infiltration trench. It holds a lot of water. And remember, this water isn't going to be going into a retention basin or going down to the next community downstream. It's going to be going into the ground, and we're done with it. So it's no surprise that this kind of alternative attracts grant money, because not only does it help Westmont residents deal with the flooding problems, but it helps communities downstream too. So county and state grants are in the future for this type of alternative. Now, I said there's an infiltration trench below the pavement. Now, how does the water get down to the trench? There's no pipe in this one like we had in the previous slide. Instead, we've got these bricks that are not normal paving bricks. They have little spacers built into the brick so that there's some space in between each of the bricks that allows the water to seep down right into the infiltration trench below. Now, if you don't like these paving bricks, well, there's another alternative. You can still have the infiltration trench below, but instead of the paving bricks, you can have porous asphalt. Now, from a distance, this looks like regular asphalt, but when you look at it close, it's got a texture like a popcorn ball. It's got little pathways where the water could percolate down through the asphalt pavement and into the infiltration trench below. Now, another interesting thing about porous pavements is that they last longer than regular roads. You know, normally in the Chicago area here, we have freezing and thawing cycles in the wintertime, and the water gets into cracks and crevices in the pavements, and then it freezes and expands, and it busts up your pavement. But in this permeable pavement, there's a lot of space built into it, and so the water does get into it, and it does freeze, but when it freezes, it expands, and it doesn't do any harm because there's room for it to expand. The oldest one we have in this area is at Morton Arboretum in their parking lot, and it was built about 10 years ago, and it still looks great. Although I know about another case of porous asphalt in Massachusetts where it was put in 1977 and hasn't been repaved yet. Now, if you only look at repaving a road and not worry about the stormwater problems that are in the same area, you're probably not going to go with permeable pavement because it's not the cheapest way to go. But if you look at the situation as a whole, if you look at the fact that you need to repave a road and you need to deal with stormwater problems in that area, now permeable pavements make a lot of sense. So the best time to look at permeable pavements is when you have to repave a road anyway. Now, a couple of other green alternatives that you don't see so much. The green roof, this is usually involved with new construction. Here's one at the Lace School in Darien. It's on 75th Street. This has a roof that has dirt on it and has green plants growing on the roof. This tends to attract grant money also. And another idea is naturalized storage basins. As we said before, Westmont Park District has already done a lot of this naturalization. This particular picture here shows a detention basin at Good Samaritan Hospital. And I've got a picture here from September of last year where it was all just grass. And then over the past year, the summer, they tore all the grass out and planted these prairie plants and ornamental grasses in there. And so now it looks a lot more natural, and you don't have to mow it. In fact, having no mowing noise is a nice benefit for the people who are nearby. So what I want to emphasize is that these green alternatives reduce the total amount of stormwater that has to be managed in the stormwater system, so that reduces the burden on the stormwater system, and as a freebie, it filters out pollutants too. This reduces the need for land acquisition, because the biggest need for land acquisition comes in the context of these storage basins. And as you know, vacant land is pretty expensive in DuPage County, but we don't really have a lot of vacant land. We have to build a property that has buildings on it and then demolish the buildings just in order to get at the land. So if we can reduce the need for land acquisition, that saves a lot of money. And as I said before, this reduces the maintenance needs. The permeable pavement lasts about twice as long as a regular pavement, and these other ideas reduce the need for lawn mowing. And the permeable pavement even uses less salt in the wintertime. So this saves money overall. And I'm going to let Bob Fleck pick it up from here.
Thank you. Again, Bob Fleck, Village of Westmont and Park District staff member, and I'm a resident. I live near Manning School. I'm here to talk to you about green initiatives. And as George mentioned, we have a number of things here in Westmont we've already started doing. For example, Warner Park. It's our best example of employing natural areas and green initiatives in our built environment. One of the goals when we built Warner was to change the public's way of thinking when it came to stormwater management and rainwater. We wanted to treat it as a natural resource rather than a waste product that requires disposal. However, there's still more we can do, and I want to give you some examples of real on-the-ground projects. Here's a picture of a before and after. George already touched on green streets. As you see, very common looking street on the left. Very similar to a lot of our neighborhoods here through Westmont. Maintenance issues, obviously drainage issues, standing water. How do you deal with it? On the right is an example of a green initiative project in Iowa. And as you can see, the end result, it's stunning. Tremendous environmental impact as well for the community. Maintenance impact as well, and it's something they're very pleased about. Another thing that these permeable streets do and it's been talked about here a lot in Westmont, traffic calming. Just the rumble of the pavers underneath the road is the best traffic calming you can find, better than any speed bump, any bottleneck, any chicane. Now, the Village of Westmont obviously doesn't own a lot of open space, and open space is one of the key factors for providing stormwater management. It's the best solution out there, but there's one thing we do own a lot of, many miles of streets. So we're looking about things differently here and using the public right-of-way as an opportunity to get the water back in the ground as nature intended, lessening the burden on flood-prone areas downhill. This is Charles City, Iowa. A smaller community than Westmont, but obviously there's a central area that is built up, and they wanted to look at this idea of green initiatives and rethinking how they handle rainwater. And as you can see, it's no different than what we experienced in April. So how do we use green strategies to improve stormwater management in our neighborhoods? It's a typical neighborhood, as I showed you previously. No curb and gutter here, but no ditch. Drainage problems, there's maintenance issues, and obviously a collection of water going on. And when you have water collecting like this and sitting on the street, it reduces the life expectancy of your road as well. Here's a cross-section from one of the neighborhoods in Charles City, Iowa. They use the entire right-of-way, not just the street, but the entire right-of-way for stormwater management here. The porous paving that George previously talked about, they're using the parkways for groundwater infiltration, stormwater management, collection, and you can even incorporate the same techniques on the sidewalk as well. Here's a detail showing a closer example of the rocks and the aggregate that's underneath, where they're using the entire lineal footage of your pave area with the pavers, the aggregate rock underneath, the infiltration through the trenches, the curbs, and rather than having the curbs sometimes be your area to trap the water, convey it, and move it away as efficiently as possible, it's helped letting that water into the ground as well. Now here's an example of the construction. As you can see, looking at the entire road width, for these projects, you do have to excavate the existing road bed, get down to your subgrade, which is even lower than our normal subgrades on typical streets in most communities. You start putting your infiltration trenches back in, your aggregates, and as part of this, there's new techniques out there as well to incorporate preservation and tree management as well. They find that afterwards, the trees actually do better in these systems than in your typical neighborhood streetscape. Here's the street nearing completion. You can see it's quite efficient when they get into the construction process. These mechanical means of putting down the pavers increase the efficiency, and they move real fast. But the benefits are, it's pretty much the same thing when it comes to maintenance or repair. If you have to get into utilities underneath, you simply pick up an area, excavate it out, and you put it right back. It's actually faster and more efficient. And as George also said, these systems, because they're flexible, because the bases don't freeze solid in the wintertime, they last so much longer. We don't know yet how long they're going to last. And the concrete pavers, they're a high-density concrete and very, very strong. So back to this slide that you saw, the before and after. New way of looking at stormwater. We saw this, we were very intrigued by it, but it goes beyond this. And what I want to talk to you about, and I want to stress to you, is the idea of community-wide green infrastructure to better environmental impact and higher cost savings. And this is called bundled green infrastructure. There's energy savings. So when we're looking at this, we're not just looking at the rainwater, we're looking at electric, we're looking at LED, we're looking at future maintenance, we're even looking at geothermal opportunities you could take farther, not only for maybe businesses that line a street, but you can even use geothermal to help reduce the amount of snow removal. It sounds like something out of a book, but geothermal can help on low snowfalls melt the snow, minimizing snow removal, labor, salt cost, extending the life of the street as well. Of course, on a 3-inch snowfall, we're going to have to get the plows out and we're going to have to deal with it as normal. But bundled green infrastructure, by putting all these things together, you can now look at a higher cost return in applying for grants. There are many more opportunities to utilize those funding resources to offset the costs. Another community in Iowa, a $9 million project cost the city $3 million after grant sources were utilized for their project. A more rapid return on investment, of course, the reduced maintenance costs and practices, but proactive responses to emerging EPA regulations. We're going to find that the things we're talking about here tonight are going to become the norm. This is what we're going to find in our codes and our ordinances. Let's get out ahead of the curve and start implementing these things for the benefit of our community. But it's a comprehensive approach. We know this isn't the only solution. We want to research all options. Everything is on the table. We want to employ the green strategies when possible, but we realize that we still have to look at conventional stormwater systems. We still need some additional detention. But if we can capture some of this water, get it into the ground upstream before it gets downhill, that's less property we have to acquire as a community to provide detention. So we want to be part of the solution. Obviously, we're all contributors to it because we all want to live here in Westmont, and we've all added the extra homes and the driveways and the streets. But hopefully, collectively, we can help solve this. All right. Next, John McClory.
Thank you, Bob. My name is John McClory. My wife and I have been Westmont residents since 1976. I'm also a member of the Westmont Emergency Management Agency. And what I'd like to talk to you tonight about is the prioritization process that we went through, how we developed that, and so on. Well, we started with, we were very fortunate in a way. We had quite a bit of, I would say, spirited discussions in our meetings. When you think about it, all of us here are more than likely Westmont residents, so the committee members were very vocal, and that was very fortunate. We were able to get a lot of issues out on the table and a lot of discussion, but that also brought something else. It brought a lot of emotion into the situation, and we knew dealing with that, what we had to do was to try to get the emotion off to the side and deal with fact. What was really going on, you know, not that mine was the most important or somebody else's was, but to look at the entire village and do well for everybody in the village. We also had a great deal of information available to us. We had the Stormwater study from 2011, which really gave us a lot of information about projects, but in some cases cost. And we've already done, as a community, several items from that study. So it's not like nothing has been going on. There are items left on that study, projects to work on. From the April flood, we also had information from the FEMA study, and we put that together with a lot of input from staff, the residents certainly that I was talking about, and we spent a great deal of time defining terminology that we were going to use throughout our meetings, but also terminology that might have been foreign to some of us, where we weren't in things like public works, where we didn't know exactly what something meant. So we had to get everybody up to sync on what was going on also. What we developed, and this was mostly developed through a subcommittee, as Larry mentioned. We did break out into a couple of subcommittees, and this was a resident group. There were 3 of us that actually worked on the matrix. And what we looked at were items such as severity. Where did we get impacted by a storm? How frequent did we get this kind of an impact? Life safety issues, okay? Resident safety, seniors, children, first responders. very important. Visitors coming through our village, could they access what they needed to do and get through? We looked at the cost and benefits of certain projects, and we had several projects that actually had to work together to achieve something. So there were dependencies where maybe Project A was the one that enabled Project B to be completed. We put those together. We developed a ranking scale, which I will get to now. The two areas we looked at were private property and public property. And if you look at the private property side on the left, we felt that if you had water on your first floor, this is your living area. That's very important, okay? Water in the basement or in your crawl space, and here where we differentiated was if you had a first floor and a basement, we felt that water on your first floor was more severe than water in your basement. Even though there might be a living space down there, you might have a bedroom down there, your first floor is where you live. That was very important to us. We wanted to differentiate between how much water there was. So we set up a severity index for 1 foot of water or more and then less. Did you have water in the garage or your yard that affected you? When we were going through this, each resident or parcel, if you will, when it was viewed by the staff putting together the details, which came from, by the way, the April study, we were very fortunate yet again to get more information, which was the residents' responses back on the survey as to how the study impacted them. So when the staff went through this, what they did was they looked at each response and said, what was your most severe situation? Did you have water on your first floor? Even if you had one or more of the others, we took the most severe situation and said, that was the worst case for you. You had water on the first floor. On the public property side, if there were flooded roads or flooded alleys or parcels along impassable roadways, we found that that was a very important issue also. It wasn't just the homeowner itself. Any good presentation has a disclaimer. We talked about this before. This is a tool. What we're presenting, this is not the end-all, solve-all. It's something to be viewed. So what we're saying in here is prioritization may change based on additional information such as flooding issue, frequency, and other facts that might come forward. So what I'm going to present to you is information that should be viewed that way as a piece of what we need to look at. The main areas of concern that we had, and these are not necessarily, as Larry had mentioned, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the main areas that really stood out to us. And they stood out because of the severity index. Where did we have big issues of maybe together impassable roads along with residential issues? King Arthur Court and the surrounding watershed, Northeast Acres, Warwick, Northwest Acres, Park Street, Chicago Avenue in Washington, the intersection and the surrounding watershed there, Richmond and Grant Street, the intersection, and the Traube Grant Detention and surrounding watershed. These are the ones that I will present to you now. Again, many, many more to be looked at. St. Joseph's Creek and King Arthur Court. King Arthur Court here, right dead center in the screen, and you can see the watershed covered out through here and the floodplain. This is really a very severe area for flooding, as we all know. When we looked at this, and again, looking at information that we had available to us for costing and what needed to be done, we know that this particular area needs pre-engineering and final engineering studies, but this might be able to be done by the county from a pre-engineering standpoint, and final, we might be able to get done through a grant. Land and easement acquisition, we might be able to get a FEMA grant if it has to be done. And construction and total cost, we truly don't know because we have to have these engineering studies done. Northeast Acres. Okay, the board's certainly aware of Northeast Acres. October 3rd, we extended the moratorium on building there, so everybody certainly is aware of this. This is a picture of that area on North Warwick, actually looking toward the south. Northeast Acres detention and East Traube relief sewer cost to try to alleviate part of the situation here. This picture is looking north, but we know from the other studies that pre-engineering study is going to cost about $63,500, as will a final engineering study. There was an estimation done by staff using, I believe, $300,000 per parcel as just a guesstimate. 20 parcels involved for land acquisition. The actual construction cost would be in the realm of $635,000, giving a total of $6.7 million for the project itself. Northwest Acres, this is Park Street, and surrounding watershed. You've got 4 pictures here. The upper left-hand corner picture is a view of Grant Avenue West at Cass. The lower left-hand corner is a picture behind Suburbanite Bowl. And the viewpoint here is North Washington and Park. You can see how it's all connected and how the water is actually flowing all the way down on all sides. The upper right-hand corner picture is a view of Chicago Avenue West at Roslyn. And lower right-hand corner is a picture of Grant Avenue South at 40th. Again, this is another one of those projects where we don't have the information, so everything is to be developed. We have to do some studies. Chicago Avenue, Washington Street surrounding watershed. Here's a view of the Chicago Avenue looking north. I don't think anything needs to be added to this picture. It kind of stands on its own. Chicago Avenue, Washington, Chicago looking west. Unfortunately, this is not a picture of my recent trip to Italy and Venice. This is Westmont. Another project where we do not, at this point in time, have the information available to us. We're going to have to do engineering studies and then go forth from that point. Here's Richmond and Grant looking south. You can see the area. It's impassable to go through here. And Lebec Park over on the side here. This particular view is showing the park that I just pointed to, and not as bad price-wise as the others, $3,500 for a pre-engineering and $3,500 for a final engineering. No land acquisition costs. Project is going to run somewhere around $35,000 for the construction, totaling up to $42,000. A favorite of Tom over here, and this is the Traube Avenue Grant Street surrounding watershed. This is looking west behind the police station at 500 North Cass. But again, that can certainly stand on its own. Police station looking west. You can see the water going all the way up through the back, over the properties, down up through the parking area over here. Again, this is something that we're going to have engineering studies done on and see what the impact would be. How do we get this done? I now turn this over to Spencer Parker, who will give you some information on how to handle this financially. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. As was mentioned, my name is Spencer Parker, and I'm the finance director here at the village. I'm also a Westmont resident the past 7 years. So to get into the funding options, there's basically 2 questions that would have to be answered before you could even decide which option you want to go with, because there's several different ways to pursue. Basically, the 2 questions are, how is it going to be paid for, and how are we going to determine how much people pay for it? And then the major question is, who's going to be paying for it? Is it going to be the entire community, or is it going to be specific areas that are most directly impacted by the project? So we're going to go through each of these different options in a little bit more detail. One of the options that was mentioned is a special service area. This is one that's paid for by taxes, and it's paid for by individuals in a specific area. This is administered by the county, so there's no additional municipal staff that's needed. From the municipal side, it's very easy to administer. The difficulties, though, is that it can be difficult to determine exactly who benefits and so therefore who should pay. And then you don't have any ongoing stream for maintenance. And then if, it could be canceled if it's opposed by more than 50% of the people. Special assessment is similar in that it's also paid for, by a specific area. and its special assessment is more typically used for undeveloped areas, but it's not as often used for developed areas, which is a lot of the areas we're talking about are developed. This is something that is, again, difficult to administer, determine who's benefiting. The village would have to administer this ourselves, and it gets processed through the courts, and it's kind of a big, a lot of things to do and to administer with it. And additionally, there's no ongoing revenue stream. So there's, as we talked about, a few different options for referendum that could go through. And all of these next few options in referenda fit under, they're paid for by the entire community, administered through taxes. So let's kind of briefly go through those. One of the items you could put on as a referendum would be a general obligation property tax bond. And this would be funded by the community, administered through the county, by the county through property taxes. So again, there's minimal impact to the village to administer this program. But the major problem is there's no ongoing stream for revenue maintenance, and it could potentially be opposed at a referendum. Another referendum that could be put on the ballot would be the referendum for home rule. And if the village were to obtain home rule, then the village would have flexibility in determining revenue source. So they could adopt any of these other methods or something else that they decide to look at. There's a lot of flexibility there. Because of that flexibility, they could establish different revenues. If it turns out that whatever revenue source we initially do isn't sufficient to cover the situation, the village board has the ability and the flexibility to go to a different revenue source. The major difficulty with this is, again, it's because it's a referendum, it could be opposed at the referendum. Another potential referendum would be a referendum for sales tax. And again, it's administered by not by the village, so it's administered by the state through sales tax. And so it, again, imposes no additional administrative burden on the municipality itself. Based on the amounts that you decide to get and what we decide to do with the amount of money we're using, you could still set up the revenue to be able to use it for future maintenance and ongoing projects. And another benefit to this system has been discussed by the village board when looking at similar systems previously, has been the fact that non-residents contribute. Other people that come and use our roads, as was talked about, the public right-of-way areas that flood, they'd be contributing to take care of some of those issues. The difficulty is that it could be opposed at a referendum, and then with this or any of the other methods where you would do an alternate revenue bond, as we did with our most recent bond, you'll recall that there's a situation where it gets published in the paper, and then there's a possibility for what's called a backdoor referendum, which is it's published in the paper, and then if a certain number of people sign a petition, then instead of issuing the bonds would go up for yet another referendum. So that's a possibility if we go with sales tax and try to issue bonds through that. A final option is a stormwater utility, and this is not funded by taxes. It's another method done by the village. It's paid for by the entire community. Some of the major benefits are that it's a fair method for determining who pays and how much they pay. So you could set it up to where it's not just based on how much you spend or the value of your property. What you pay is based on what you contribute to the stormwater issue. It also is generally set up to include incentives, which would help to reduce long-term costs. So you could say, if you do something to help take care of stormwater, then you get a reduction in your fee, which encourages more people to do things on their own to help take care of the stormwater. And then you could set it up so that you get an ongoing stream for maintenance and to be used with that as a utility. We treat it very similar to the way we treat our water fund, which is currently a utility where the money we get from the water fund goes into the water fund to take care of the water fund. This would be the same setup if we were to do a stormwater utility. Some of the difficulties for it is that it would take some time to set up and require some ongoing staff to administer it, because this is not one that's administered by the county or the state. This is one that we would have to be administering in-house. So there'd be some additional staffing costs associated with that. If it is submitted for an advisory referendum, then it could potentially be opposed. And once the utility is issued and then we're getting revenue, and if we do go for a bond to take care of these, it's also subject to the backdoor referendum, as was mentioned before. So I just put together a brief chart that kind of goes through the costs and the impacts to people. And at this point, these are very rough estimates. There's a lot of time and detail that would have to go into coming up with very firm estimates. But in general, our rough estimates are, it works out rather nicely for estimating purposes. For a $10 million bond, we would be charging about $10 a month for a utility fee for an average resident, and the cost that an average resident would have if it were on the property tax instead would be just about the same amount. So they both come to right about $10 a month, and that would give us about $10 million worth to do in projects. To do the same amount with sales tax, you'd need about 0.5% sales tax, which is what the village had previously as a home rule community. If you were looking at a $15 million bond, it would be $15 a month or a 0.75% sales tax. If you're looking at a $20 million bond, you'd be looking at about $20 a month or about a 1% sales tax. The other methods, home rule, obviously it depends on what the village does after it becomes home rule. If they adopt sales tax, it would follow the sales tax. If they do one of the other options, it's whatever the other option is. But basically, the entire community is contributing one way or another. It comes out about the same for an average resident. The special assessment and the special service areas will vary by individual location. So the amount that those individuals would contribute would be significantly more than $10 a month, but it would depend on the specific location to see how much each person would contribute. I don't know if Larry wanted to make some comments on utility specifics.
Thank you. As we go forward here, we're going to be talking more about that final option, which is the stormwater utility. We're going to go through the details of how Downers Grove created their stormwater utility. There's 9 communities in Illinois that have stormwater utilities, and Downers Grove is one of them. And basically, the fees were based on impervious area on each parcel, measured in what they define as ERUs, equivalent runoff units. And what they did was they determined in Downers Grove what is the average square footage of impervious, for single-family homes, what is their impervious area, and they determined that to be 3,300 square feet. That is the average, so they then equated that to be 1 ERU. And so then using that measurement, they developed 3 tiers for charges. For single-family residential monthly fees, the first tier would be a 0.75 ERU, and in Downers Grove, that's up to 2,500 square feet impervious area. The second tier, which would be the average impervious area, single-family residence, once again defined as a 1 ERU, and that's 2,500 up to 4,000 square feet. And then the third tier is more than 4,000 square feet, and that'd be charged at 1.5 ERU. Also, once again, using ERUs is how they would define the rates for non-single family residential monthly fee. That also includes commercial properties. And then the final one there is vacant and unimproved parcels, and what the monthly rate would be for that. As mentioned, being a utility, there's opportunity for incentives and credits. The way those are defined, an incentive is a one-time reduction, and then a credit would be an ongoing reduction. And once again, this is encourages homeowners to do things on their own property to address the stormwater management that their property is accountable for. Things such as rain barrel programs, and we should mention that just briefly. We initiated a rain barrel program to promote the use of those in our community, and in 2013 up until the beginning of this program, I think we sold a total of 6. And I think we've now, once the program of buy one, get one, well, it's half price is what it was, we sold over 120. And so it just shows that people are interested in these topics, and they really took advantage of it. Anyway, going back to the stormwater utility, this is sort of the outline of the incentives and credits. And for our closing comments, we have Carolina, who is a resident of the community and actually lives near the police fire facility.
Good evening. My name is Carolina Pshabrowski. I am a resident of Westmont, and I live in the property directly behind the police station. And we were severely impacted by the recent storm, and in addition, every time it rains, our property is affected. But that is just my story, and as a member of this committee, I got to hear many other stories of individuals and how they are affected by stormwater in this community. And together, we were able to put our individual interests aside to form recommendations that we can make to this committee to help the community as a whole. The first of these recommendations deals with funding, because without money, we cannot do a lot. So we would like the board to consider, create, and approve a utility that guarantees an ongoing revenue stream to address stormwater management concerns and provides funding for regular management and maintenance in the future. Creation of an ongoing revenue source is fundamental to the success of this initiative.
And as Carolina said, we've talked a lot about these issues. We've seen a lot of pictures of devastation, and we've had people come to this boardroom to talk about those items. None of this gets addressed without funding, and we do not have current revenue streams to address this. We're talking millions of dollars. And Spencer kind of outlined 6 different options, but the committee, through investigation and an extensive talk, decided unanimously that this is the route to go. So anyway, that's the recommendation of the committee to the board.
If the board does decide to proceed with the utility, we have a suggested timeline which is fast-tracked. In phase 1, the commission, we would commission a feasibility study and develop a utility plan. The timeline for that would be November 2013, with the hopes of it being completed by February 2014. In phase 2, we would provide public information meetings, or we would give the public information about what a utility is. The timeline for that is between March and May 2014. And in phase 3, the village board would formally vote on the creation of a community stormwater utility, and implementation would begin. The timeline for that just roughly would be June 2014.
It should be reiterated that that is a fast-tracked timeline. And anyway, the board would have to figure out the details on that.
In addition, we would also like the board to consider and adopt new stormwater management policies. We would like the board to adopt a policy that ensures annual inspections of every storm, drain, sewer, and storm-related infrastructure in the village to ensure proactive maintenance and reduce reactive expenses. We would also like the board to adopt a policy to employ dedicated personnel to community stormwater management and maintenance, and to meet the above stated policy. The personnel could be full-time, part-time, or a contractor.
This is important because due to reduced revenues in the village and budget cuts over the last decade, our public works staff numbers have been greatly reduced. And because of that, we do not really have that much of a proactive maintenance program. We need personnel to take care of these things. Right now, a lot of our work is reactive. We do as much as we can, but we do it with what we can. The only way to do more is to hire personnel.
We would also like the board to consider and adopt new stormwater codes and ordinances. Specifically, we would like the board to adopt the code that applies FEMA construction rules to low depressional area properties with more than 3 acres of off-site tributary area.
The FEMA construction rules applies to what's referred to as a mapped floodplain. And basically, it's a restrictive code. It does not allow you to do certain types of things on those types of properties because it doesn't make sense. It contributes to increasing stormwater problems. So basically, you would take those rules and apply them to other areas that are not mapped floodplains, but still have tremendous difficulties, and that would help those neighborhoods.
We would also like the board to adopt a code that requires a 2 or 3 foot freeboard between the lowest floor elevation and the base floor elevation for a building.
And because I'm not an engineer, I cannot explain this one all that well. What I can tell you for sure is that our code currently allows for a 1 foot freeboard, is that accurate? And in neighboring communities, I think Downers has a 2 or 3 foot?
Downers has 3, and Lyle has 2.
And Lyle has 2. But basically, by implementing this change to the code, it will greatly assist with our stormwater management needs.
If the board does decide to go with a stormwater utility, we would also like the board to consider a resolution to the county board. That way our residents are not paying twice, or at least that their fees may be reduced for any improvements that they're doing. This resolution will be advocating the village's position regarding county stormwater utilities fees, including reduced fees for Westmont residents if our community is addressing our own stormwater management concerns, reduce fees if Westmont has less impact on county-maintained stormwater systems, specific information regarding how and when the county will address stormwater concerns affecting Westmont residents, work with county to obtain permission to use county equipment and resources, as well as look for opportunities for cost sharing.
As all of you are aware, and probably many of our residents are aware, the state has allowed the county to create a county utility fee. And they're currently in a 2-year development and education mode. And representatives from the county came to one of our meetings to discuss this. They are looking for feedback from municipalities and village boards regarding what they're planning to do. They have not figured out their full plan. So they're looking for advisement from us, and that's where this resolution comes into play.
We would also recommend that the board give direction to continue the Community Stormwater Committee to follow through on current recommendations, as well as continue with additional stormwater management initiatives. What started out as a forum for residents to share their frustrations concerning a very difficult and emotional topic has evolved into a unified vision by our residents to work together with the village to provide solutions that will benefit the entire community. And also in closing, as a committee, we would like the board to take all of our recommendations and really act on them. I think that when we all joined the committee, we all were frustrated, we were angry, we all had our own individual ideas of what we wanted done. But every Monday night that we met, we were able to put those aside and form solutions and try to find a solution that works for the community as a whole. Because we realize that it is a village problem. It's not an individual problem, and it has to be looked at from a village perspective, which you all know because we had a meeting following the recent storm, and you got to hear firsthand accounts of how people were affected, of how emotional they were, of how much they lost. And in addition, today you got to hear our recommendations. And with that, we hope that you do take action and you do also find a solution for the community as a whole. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you, Carolina. I'd like to quickly mention all the names of the committee members. Obviously, a lot of work was put into this, and the great majority of the presentation was by residents. And so I'm just going to quickly list everybody's names. Jimmy Wright, who could not be here, was on the committee. Of course, our chair, Steve Nero, was resident and also affected by flooding. Jim Burke, Bob Gleason, Kelly Karish, Carolina, who just presented, John McClory, Joe Esposito, John Jagailo, Mike Graham, Glenn Gabriel, George Hamper, and Glenn Liljeberg. If we can give those folks a round of applause for their work. So they just presented their recommendations, and so now everybody has a lot to think about. There's a lot of residents here in the room. I recognize their faces because they've been here before to talk about their devastation. And we want to invite those folks, the public, to come up. Like I said, there's a lot of information to digest, so if members of the public are interested.
Yes.
Or I'm sorry.
Real quick, Mr. Mayor, if I could, we thanked the committee multiple times, but we also forgot to thank the staff. I think all of us could attest to Larry keeping us on direction, keeping the committee going, keeping us to point. As you can imagine, this was very emotional. We would go off in different subjects and different areas, and you really did kept us in line. So thank you for that. And I started writing down everybody else's name, and I mean, we had just about every department chair helping us on this committee, from Steve May to Shannon to Spencer to everybody. I mean, and Kim Nickel, of course, we can't thank her enough for all their expertise. So everybody was really, really part of it. So thanks again. You can't forget Bob Fleck either. I know he's still around here somewhere. So thanks, Bob.
He's hiding in the back.
He's back.
But that's all I have.
Well, needless to say, it's very impressive. There's a lot of hard work that went into this, and I know the board probably has some comments, but I think it's appropriate now to allow any resident or anybody out there in the public, and you can come to the podium. Please state your name. If you'd like to state your address so we can have it for the record, and go ahead, and the floor is yours.
My name is Jim Gagnar. I've lived at 410 North Warwick since January of 2005. The residents there have lovingly renamed it Lake Warwick. In some ways, in a somewhat bizarre way, I'm kind of happy for the 100-year storm because the 3 before didn't really get anybody's attention. I'm not blaming anyone, but it didn't get anybody's attention. Most of my neighbors faced, tremendous economic damage. I mean, mine was a big number, covered by insurance. As you all know, we have this ongoing history of flooding. I am extremely encouraged by what this study says. It's amazing. I did not expect this. I honestly did not. Call me distrustful, but I did not expect this. So I'm very impressed by that. But I want to echo, I think, what the last speaker said, and that is, we need to move quickly. There were 3 of these before the 100-year storm. And it's not just my area. There are multiple areas. Some are obviously worse than others. So I think we need to move quickly. Some areas have been devastated also. In particular, Warwick's a busy street because it's literally a shortcut and an egress from the Jewel. Everybody knows that. I think that we need to think about fighting all the priorities that you have to fight as a government. That is, there was all the write-up about creating a TIF district and all that. I mean, I don't really care about a TIF district when I'm worrying about, hundreds of thousands of gallons of water going in my basement. So I would like to encourage you to think about the fact that the way to solve a big problem is put maximum force on it. True, you have to collect fees. I understand that. And I'm more than willing to pay whatever you think is fair. But maybe some other things don't get done this time, where things got done before. And maybe they just sit and wait. People get irritated. That happens. So I encourage you to move with maximum force. I mean, clearly you saw the pictures of Warwick. It is not just an economic issue. It's a safety issue. And we're talking about a pretty deep lake at that time. Thank you again for all the energy you put into this, you and the committee. I appreciate it. And I hope, as I said, we can try to put a little force behind this and move as expeditiously and as powerfully as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Larry Gress, 339 South Park Street. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to thank Steve for his spearheading the group, and certainly Larry McIntyre for all the hard work that he put forth, and all the committee members that were part of this tremendous effort that went forth. I'd like to echo Mr. Harwick's words. I think that we've all experienced in this last flood something that none of us expected, although I have experienced it twice before that at 339 Park since owning my house for the last 6 years. I've lost everything in my house 3 times. Mine is a little unique. I think that it's been pointed out here earlier, although I got here a little bit late to the meeting. I had to attend a wake this evening, so my apologies for being a little tardy. At any rate, it is a priority for the village with respect to what has been put forth here this evening. There are expenditures, we all know. I'm glad to see that we have options for all of the residents to be able to absorb some of the expense that's going to be associated with the effort that will be put forth to solve the village-wide problems. But again, I just wanted to come up and thank the group for participating the way that we did the last several months, and hope that the village does take quick action. Some of the things that were pointed out in terms of the timetables frankly frighten me. We've experienced flooding in December. We've experienced flooding in the springtime. And every time it rains, I quake in my shoes. I can't go to sleep at night when I hear a forecast of rain because I'm afraid of what is going to happen next. Steve, you were there at the last rain that we had just a couple of weekends ago on a Sunday. I appreciate you coming over and taking a look at that firsthand, but I was just inches away from my house flooding once again on a very, very light rain of only 1.5 inches. So my problem is a little more severe, in my opinion, as humble as it may be before you this evening. And Steve, you recognize that too, and I thank you for all the attention that you've given us and the special attention in some of these times when the grates have backed up in the alley and not allowed the water to get through the pipe onto the 55th Street, which is what the thrust of my issue is with respect to how the property sits on the corner of 55th and Park Street. So once again, thank you very much for everything and what you've done here, and I hope that we can solve the problems for those that have the most immediate need. And I certainly think that someone whose house floods completely, that takes you out of your home for months on end, is a little more severe than somebody whose basement floods, or whose backyard floods, or whose street floods. So I was happy to be able to see the prioritization that took place through this process, and we look forward to being able to resolve this for us personally and for everybody else that's been affected. We all suffered through it, and my pain is shared by everybody else, and I share everybody else's pain as well. But again, thank you for everything, and we look forward to what the council will do to help us resolve these issues. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
For a little perspective to the one slide you saw when Mr. McClory was describing the King Arthur watershed area, the one home with the water up high on the building was that address.
Anybody else from the audience like to comment?
Hello. I'm Mary Robertson Iverson. I live in Northeast Acres, 320 North Warwick. This committee did a fabulous job. It's so nice. We have wonderful, wonderful volunteers, and I know for the amount of time that they've been meeting, it's a lot out of a person's life. And having said that, the plans, I really like the green initiatives. But I can see already this is going to take years, decades, and millions of dollars. It's not going to happen overnight. On a selfish note, Northeast Acres can't wait that long. We are under a building moratorium. That's how bad it is. It just got renewed. We right now are at a disadvantage, in my opinion, to the rest of the village because we have been devalued due to this moratorium. And we are, to be part of a comprehensive plan, I don't think is fitting for our area. I just want to give my 2 cents on that. I really would appreciate if there was a way that all the work that had been started on Northeast Acres to cure its problems can continue in side by side with the Stormwater Committee. We got to fix ours. People have not gotten rid of their sandbags. It's pretty sad out there. Also, I have a neighbor. He could not be here today. Michael Connery, he's from 404 North Warwick. He asked me to drop off a letter. And basically what he's saying, he feels too that Warwick should, the flooding in Northeast Acres, which still come down to Warwick basically, it should be priority number one because we don't have years and decades to wait for this to get fixed. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like everybody goes out in the hallway to come out. It's like the loading.
Sorry.
Take off.
We're lining up. Good evening. My name is Joe Hernstrick. I live at 224 East Naperville, and I will say that I'm extremely pleased by what I heard tonight. The ideas, the plans, the things that have been brought forward. I would have a question, one thing, the use of a fee or a utility to pay for stormwater work. I would prefer it to be placed under a property tax, and I will tell you why. Because the people, this would take the money, instead of putting an increment on us, this would give us a tax deduction. We could then take the money and charge it against the people who do very little to help us, the state of Illinois and the federal government. I don't hear anything about federal funds in any of these projects. So you're proposing going for grants and funds, and I didn't hear anything about going to the state. I doubt the state has any money. But this would then allow us to deduct that money, which probably for me would be around $1,800, or let's see, no, $200 off of my income tax. because it's going to be an increase in my property tax. I think it was $15 for a .10. I think that would be about what my calculation would be. So if you take that, that would be about $200 that I could actually knock off my federal income tax. The second thing is I'd certainly like to see some of these techniques be implemented in some of the places of flooding that are along such places as Ogden Avenue, where significant work's been done. And we saw flooding during the last storm. You could put these permeable pavers in on Ogden Avenue, use Ogden Avenue as a retention area. That's a nice, big, long retention area. The same thing that I'm a little disappointed in is the county, where they rebuilt 55th Street, and the area where the gentleman was just speaking. My daughter lives just behind there at 336 South Hudson. She had water in her backyard. Matter of fact, she could not even get to her home during the last storm. She took her children to school in Downers Grove. They go to St. Mary's, and when they finally found their way back, the police wouldn't let them through because the roads were so flooded, and she had to just go and park and wait till the water went down to enough degree she could walk to the home. So these are issues, you know, this could have been used at that alley between Park and Hudson there, out in the roadway and even in the alley to paving to use that as a permeable area to help. I know that it's a problem that's been ongoing. Those are the kind of things I see, though. It's an outstanding piece of work. Certainly, you know, I would be willing to replace my driveway, which is, I think, coming up on 38 years old, but it's solid concrete. We could put pavers in there eventually and replace them. These are great ideas. Of course, I would like to look for, you know, grants, loans, and things like that to seek funding from the other sources so that we get some of the rewards for what we've been paying taxes for so many years. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Mayor, when the county came and spoke to the committee, and actually in other presentations they had, they know they're forming a utility, but they have not decided yet if they're going to go fee-based or tax-based, and for the reasons that Mr. Hernsrud just described, they are debating the same issue, you know, the merits of a tax.
Evening.
My name is Don Humber. I live at 313 North Warwick Avenue. And I again want to echo what was done by the committee. And the group, I think they did an exceedingly good job in terms of outlining options and alternatives for the board to consider. The one question I do have, though, is the total cost. On some of the slides, I saw a lot of TBDs, to be determined, to be assessed. I saw some values to fix some certain areas. I think the Warwick area, $6.75 million. But does the committee have a rough idea of what the total cost is going to be?
We'll let Larry answer that, and then you can continue.
Directly, the answer is no. You know, specifically, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to figure that out. And as a committee, we talked about that early on, is because that's a question that people want to ask. How much money is going to take? 10 million, 20 million, 30 million? And the reality is that there is no magic number that we can give that's going to say this is going to answer all our questions, because all it might take is a flood bigger than the one that we had this past April, and even if we have new infrastructures in, it might not handle, you know, Mother Nature, we're at her mercy at all times. Having said that, the Burke study, which was completed and we reviewed that in 2011, Steve, around $10 million, we were able to accomplish quite a bit?
Yes, but in that study specifically was addressing issues that were inventoried that were in the public right away.
Right.
There's a much more comprehensive list of issues that have come up. The ranking inventory that we put together doesn't discriminate against any quality that it has. So it could be in public property, private property, and it goes through the same ranking process, and the smaller ones obviously would be ranked closer to the bottom, but it didn't discriminate against public and private. So I'd say the new list is probably more than double the length that was in the original study, and we know very well that that's not complete. You know, so as the years go on, you know, more areas will be identified and put through the ranking methodology.
And having said that, that sort of makes a case for, potentially for the stormwater utility, because if it's an ongoing revenue source, then there's money that continues to come in. Basically, you need money to continue to come in to address these needs as they're ongoing.
Absolutely. And then, just as a follow-up question in regards to the time frame, it did seem like a fairly aggressive plan. And if my notes were correct, I think it was by June of 2014, they were asking the board, the committee, to actually implement some actions that were recommended. I think that was the correct time frame. How do you all feel about that time frame? Do you actually think that June of 2014 is doable, given all of the TBDs to be determined, all of the assessments that still need to be done, a response in terms of we don't know exactly how much funding is going to be needed, but it certainly ranges from tens to maybe 30 to maybe even more millions of dollars. It seems like there's a lot of work still to be done at this point, and with a plan of implementation of June. Gentleman spoke earlier that we flooded in December and we have the spring floods, and he's right. And June isn't a very aggressive plan, implementation plan for such an enormous undertaking. But does that seem realistic to the board?
I'll ask Public Works Director May to kind of comment on that one.
There are several aspects to those, to that timeline and the concepts. And if you're thinking about, doing all the construction projects in June, certainly, the undertaking of the entire plan is daunting, and there's a lot to do, and it would take many, many years to, take it to the end. I think the more important thing to take away from that part of the presentation is the need or the desire or the recommendation to don't stop moving on the progress towards this, to this implementation, to whatever the solution will be, whatever you agree, whether it's a utility or what other form that we take from here. So certainly there's feasibility studies that would have to be done. Someone would have to do a more thorough, professional, probably consultant, would need to do a more thorough job on the feasibility and put together the time frame. They showed examples of Downers Grove. Those are just examples. Tiers, the rates, all of that's a direct calculation based on the features of your community, and much of that still has to be inventoried. So it's more, think of those timelines as the starting of that phase of the process, and again, the goal is just to move fast and not, stop and think about it for, budget cycle after budget cycle.
And just one final comment. A gentleman, I think, spoke of prioritization in general. An awful lot of activities that need to be done in Westmont, an awful lot of tasks and projects. And managing those projects take resources, obviously, funding, individual time, committee time. And I think what we're saying as a community is that, and I kind of agree to his point, is that maybe some other projects that are, quote, important in general may need to take a back burner to these projects and those kind of assessments, and hiring a consultant to do that and moving forward with those analyses. Because, quite frankly, you are looking at a multi-year solution, if you will, for the village. And some of the other projects perhaps on the docket, although as painful as it may be, you can't do everything today. And being in project management, I understand how you have to prioritize, and it's a difficult task. But I think we're all asking you to certainly elevate this task to the highest level, because properties are being devalued, people are losing property. It's harder to sell a home in Westmont right now than it was when I first moved here 23 years ago. So it's an important topic, not only for the people who are directly affected, but even for those who are not directly affected by the flooding. So then, maybe some other projects do need to get reprioritized a little bit lower and elevate this as a group. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Right, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, those are all good points, and when the ranking inventory was described, I can't remember how many columns there were with different factors that could be taken into account as for using for ranking and how you would weight each one. So I don't want to call it infinite, but there's many different ways that you can algorithm, if you would, how you would prioritize and rank this, and anywhere from severity-based, which was presented, to a cost-based approach to it. So these are all, there's a lot to it. I mean, the committee understands that, you all understand that, I don't have to explain that to you, but that was just the one scenario and how the conclusion that the committee came to, as far as what they feel is important.
Is there anybody else from the audience? Public? If not, then we will finally get to hear. Look, at Trustee Addington's got his hand up already.
All I can say is, wow. Steve, you guys, this was phenomenal. This is one of the best groups that have made a report to this village board in years. And I mean that sincerely. I am so impressed with what these guys did. I'd like them all to stand up again one more time, because you guys were phenomenal. All your committee members, please.
Let's see.
And a lot of credit also to Steve for heading this thing up, keeping it on focus. To Larry, I think they did a heck of a job. There's some great recommendations here. I think we need to go over them, but I'm not sure procedurally how to start. But I think one of the last recommendations should be implemented immediately, and that's to make the Stormwater group an official committee to keep us on focus as we bring this thing forward.
I'm not abolishing them.
Okay. Well, no, I'm just saying, that was one of the recommendations, was to make it kind of
they're still
to
in
keep it
existence.
going. Yeah, okay.
And just for a point of reference, I already discussed with the village manager, this will be on our November 14th agenda. It'll actually be an agenda item for board consideration for every one of these recommendations. That gives us basically 3 weeks from tonight to do a little bit fact-finding, to digest everything, to get some direction. Personally, I don't see anything that's out of the ordinary with this. Some of the comments were to prioritize this and do other, to put in the back burner some other projects. What I see this as a standalone, and I don't really know how it would even, a lot of this stuff's going to be hiring consultants to oversee it. And I think we could probably, pardon?
At least initially to formulate what we're.
So I don't see this, if we move ahead with this, going to the back burner. I think it's a standalone in itself to stormwater management. So.
Can I ask one question related to that? I apologize for my voice, too. As we discussed, we would put the committee recommendations on for consideration, review, and potential adoption. I'm wondering if we should also put a separate item on just for the issue of the stormwater utility. I guess I'm trying to get a sense of how the board's reaction is to that. That is a mechanism that's being used in a number of communities now. We know that. Downers Grove took them about 10 years to put it together. So there's a lot of information out there already on how to do it. There are consultants that have been working on this in a number of communities. There are a number of, I've just got a list of a handful of non-home rule communities here in Illinois that have recently implemented it. I'm just wondering how quickly we want to push that particular recommendation forward. How does the board feel about that? Or do you want to just keep that as part of the overall study or the committee recommendations for discussion?
I think everything hinges on that. I mean, that we need that. That's the financial mechanism for us to move forward.
Well, so. I guess the point being is that, again, I'm in agreement with everything that the committee said, but I think us locking in that funding needs some discussion, and that's where I have concerns.
That's kind of why I'm thinking that maybe it should be a separate item for discussion, because it is such a critical piece to pushing this forward. And I didn't want it to get lost in the overall discussion.
Would each one of the recommendations
Didn't the mayor ask for each of the recommendations be on there separately? So wouldn't it already be?
Well, there'd be one item for the review and accepting it. I'm just
To discuss?
suggesting that, and again, I guess I'm agreeing with the comments that it seems like it's such a critical component
Sure.
to push forward the programs and the results that everybody wants to see, that maybe it ought to be a separate item for discussion. That's all I'm asking. The
But
board's
on the
sense
same
that.
meeting, could you have another agenda item after it discussing these other?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
so it all
Two
can be on the
items is what I'm
14th.
talking
yes.
about.
I got it. All right, so
I'll leave this up to either Ron Searle or to Spencer. The question is, there were two very diverse recommendations. I listened to Joe Hernsrick's thing about the property taxes, and I understand that. But a utility tax or utility fee almost indicates to me that to some extent that's a user. In other words, the more utilities I use in my household, I'm gonna pay more. And the less I use, the less I pay, to some extent. But I don't know if
Well, that
there's
is-
any
well,
deduction for
I
that.
was going to ask, just for Larry, you used this ERU from Downers, and they had basically 3 residential tiers, you know, 0.5, 0.75, what did that equate to for dollars from one tier to the other?
I'm not going to remember
You know, because
definitely, but
you went
it's from-
2,000 square feet to 4,000, and then you went over 4,000, and
I think the low end was around $6 and the high end was around $12.
so that's the range we would be kind of looking at for our residential a month.
Per month.
Yeah, it just kind of depends. I mean, once again, it's sort of like what number do we want to get to ultimately? And that's the reason we put the number in there at $10 a month. You know, what would that end up being? And that ended up being about $10 million.
And we call it a user fee, which is a little different than your water. It's going to be based on the square footage of your...
Of impermeable surface.
Okay. So it's a user fee based on,
Yeah, and it's a flat rate within a range, so it can be probably most easily compared to the way we do our water billing. If you use 0 gallons of water up to 1,000, I believe it's one rate, and then if it's 1,001 up to the next level, so it would be very similar to that. And at the same time, it would probably show up on your water bill. All those things would be to be determined, but that's the way it would probably show up in
and
people's.
the difference from a administration standpoint, that can be done by board action. A property tax increase needs, I believe, voter
Referendum?
approval.
It needs a referendum.
A voter approval. a referendum.
Right, and of course, the challenge with that is, obviously, it takes time to say that you're going to go to a referendum, and then promote it, which once again is an interesting thing. We ran into that with home rule. The village has an obligation to be unbiased, to talk about a referendum. So then it's up to the residents to support it or not support it. And then you go through all of that time, and in the end, they're going to vote, and if it's turned down, we're back to square zero with no money coming through.
And I think what you, in your timeline, you showed that March, April, May, if I read this right, if we decide to do utility tax, we would allow that, the opportunity for the public to come in and question and educate them a little bit about us applying that.
Absolutely. We've done things like this in the past. Of course, we did that with the home rule. We had an education period, I suppose, when we did the electric, where we changed over and reduced everybody's electric bill. We did a lot of education for that, so it'd be no different. And we thought maybe 3 months might be a good time frame. Hold several hearings here, go throughout the community, answer people's questions, let them know that it's important and how it would work.
And real quick, and I let the rest of the trustees comment on this, but I think we've got a very good representation of our community by having the 14 individuals from each segment of geographic area in the community recommend this to us. I think from that standpoint, I think our public has spoken that they recommend the utility tax.
But we still have 24,000 other people.
I know we do. That's why I want to hear from them.
That for
So,
transparency, we have to make sure that the word gets out. As for the time frame, I'm not quite sure I'd want government to have an open-ended on it. So we don't know how long this is going to take. I mean, we can talk, here's your timeframes on getting things done. But until this thing gets going,
sure,
there might be delays. But I like the fact that you're going to keep our feet to the fire to get it done. No open-ended on it. It's got to have timeframes on it.
Yeah, and Phase 3 really isn't getting things done. You do Phase 1, Phase 2, and you get to Phase 3, and that's actually where you start.
Well, getting things done as of getting our ducks in a row.
Sure, exactly.
Is done, and, you know.
A lot of work.
Absolutely. And I think by seeing tonight the amount of people that are here, you know,
They're
this
committed.
shows good government.
Yeah.
It's government by the people because the residents are the ones that are making the decision how to fix this problem. It's not us. We'll be orchestrating it, but they're the ones that came up and did it. And,
You know,
I give them all the credit.
The other thing that I really enjoyed about this presentation was the green initiative to talk about the pavers and taking the parkways and, you know, like we talked about with that detention pond, just go in there and, you know, all kinds of things start running through my head. Every time we talk about mitigating a wetland, I wonder if I couldn't change those, take those out and move them to one of the parkways and turn that into a rain garden and do things like that. Steve, what do those pavers do to your snowplows?
Don't ask Steve. We don't know, but it's not the first place that, you know, has put in these permeable pavers, and they do snow removal. The consultant presentation indicated through their experience, like, firstly, you have less snow and ice control that's even needed because it has taken away some of that aspect of the operation, and they say they're plowed normally. I even asked about, you know, rubberized blades and stuff, and they don't even suggest that that's necessary. So, you know, until I peel one up for the first time, I'm assuming that it's easy to, you know, to manage.
Plus, we were told, too, one of the major advantages is rather than repairing potholes and cutting big sections of road out, you're doing it in little pieces now, so it's a lot easier to repair.
I thought that was
Should be
a
zero
really
potholes.
great part of this whole presentation. I even thought about, you know, like we've done with the public safety grants and some of the other things. Heck, if there was a little bit of this money was set aside for residents who want to take out their driveways and put in these kind of pavers so that water stays on your own property instead of running to the street. I'd even consider something like that.
One thing we didn't, I know Joe mentioned the federal or grants, and we asked and Bob Fleck, if you can
he's out
come
there.
to, I think one of the advantages of going to this sort of a system, there's numerous grant opportunities out there now, and I know Bob's more versed in this than anybody.
Absolutely. One of the most common ones, and we've utilized it already here in Westmont, EPA 319, it's a clean water grant. But there's a number of other ones when you start looking at health and wellness, and you can justify, we talked about bundling the green initiatives. When you start partnering up and looking at a holistic approach to addressing problems in your community, you start finding other links and other opportunities, and there are definitely federal grants out there that work for this. Even the DuPage County has some grants available that we could hopefully tap into as well. So they're out there, and one of the consultants we've already started talking to, and hopefully we will have an opportunity to work with them. They really have their pulse on the finger, their finger on the pulse of all these opportunities that are out there, because this is their forte, and they partnered up with some of the cutting edge technologies and other consultants out there, and they've formed teams, and they really know where to look and how to tap into these things.
But even the rain barrels take water away from.
Well, that's what the credit was, the rain barrels will.
Yeah.
Sure. I want to just piggyback on that. Jim Patchett was one of the presenters that came into our meetings, and we'd love for the board to hear that presentation as well, because it was very exciting. But in one of their projects in Iowa, it was a $9 million plus total project, and I believe they've received $6 million.
$3 million out of pocket.
They only paid $3 million for a $9 million project. Because they got $6 million in green initiative grants. Additionally, some of that grant money was directly related to what they refer to as pilot project grants. And if we were to do something like that on a big level here in this town, they were thinking that we might also apply for those here in Illinois. In fact, they even laid out a proposal where not only would they address all sorts of the issues that were talked about tonight with our most severe flooding areas, but they also talked about redoing the downtown and thought that potentially grant money would pay for the project. And so all those are opportunities to be researched and identified for certain, but it was an exciting conversation, I can tell you that much.
Mr. Mayor.
Trustee
have to-
Barker?
can I-
Yeah, why, because it's Iowa?
Oh, you bet.
Oh,
You got that right, Ron. You think of Iowa, and it's a lot of wide open space, and they're very serious about conserving their areas. I'm very proud of Iowa doing this, I really am. But I'm very proud of your committee, too. You did a great job. All of them did a wonderful presentation tonight. You should be very proud. I'm very proud of all of you people that served on that committee. You did a wonderful job.
Trustee Barker.
Yeah, I just wanted again to thank the committee and the residents for all their work and input. And you know what, I also want to let the rest of the community know that it isn't done. It's an ongoing thing, so they're going to need more help and more people to get involved to keep this going. As everybody knows here, that it's an ongoing thing. It's going to take weeks, months, and years, and a lot of meetings going forward. And then I would ask, you know, the staff if we could have all of this presentation in writing, because we need to understand that as we go forward. I'd like that, and anything else that you guys have that would be of value to us, because we do care, we want to be informed, and we want to do the right thing by the village. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So I want to get that information. Then I would also ask the staff in the budget process that's coming up to do whatever they had to do to make sure that the funds were available and that attention was placed on the things that we need to keep this going forward. Because without the money and without the planning, it just doesn't happen. And you know, there is a cost, there is an expense to it. And let's make sure that we give it 100% effort so that it's successful. So that comes down to good planning and of course, a ton of work. That's enough from me. And again, thank you for your efforts.
And I asked Trustee Addington and the board if I may want to recommend, if you'd so agree to chair it, Administrative Finance Committee prior to the meeting so that we can review this item in detail prior to the 14th.
Do we have anything else that night, the 14th?
Public Works.
On the
Do it at
14th?
Public Works?
Public Works is easy.
I just think if we can do it at Public Works, I think it'd be beneficial in a committee setting that we address this.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
And we'll publish that, it'll be 5:30 probably on the 14th, and then it'll be on the agenda of the evening. Other trustees?
Sure.
Sure, Trustee Barry, yeah? I saw you writing.
Sure, I've been writing. I've been taking good notes today. But over the last couple months, I've been very impressed by the Mariano's presentations. And I've commented to a lot of people in town that if this is how you should go about opening a business and coming into a town, this presentation is leaps and bounds above that. Educational, a lot of time and effort, and as Kelly said, it's a solution throughout the community. And hats off to you guys. This is really one of the most impressive groups that I've seen as far as even coming tonight and sitting through this. I do hope that we have other opportunities to talk about it as a board, as you're saying, at either an executive session or a special meeting or possibly just again because it's so much information and we just got it on a fast track, I guess is the phrase. So I'd like to get a chance to digest it all and look at the best possibilities to serve the whole community. And again, just so impressive and thank you to everyone involved.
You know, again, and we just keep talking about the presentation and the great work, but the innovation, the innovative things that they gave us tonight with the green initiative and the parkway, the what do they call them, the gardens.
Gardens, yeah.
I mean, they're just some phenomenal ideas that I think we can implement, and it works, and it's going to take something away from flooding someplace. It ain't gonna help Warwick Street, those kind of things. Warwick has been a problem since I moved there from over here on the south side in 1971. I think the first spring that Kathy and I lived in our house, we walked down to Warwick Street in 1971 and watched kids in a canoe. So that has been a problem, probably, Bob, since you've been here, when there wasn't any houses on it. But, what's that? It was a swimming hole. Yeah, it was a swimming hole. But again, there's so much information, as Trustee Barry said. It's going to take a while to digest it all, but I want this thing to keep going. I want it on the fast track, and I'll do everything that I can, because I just can't believe what a job you guys did. It's just wonderful.
The one thing I can comment on, every recommendation that was mentioned tonight, initially, I don't see one objection to it. So it's not like something jumped out and said, absolutely not.
Well, I think when we look at the history, what Bob and staff have done at Thai, at Twin Lakes Park, where you're seeing these start to be used, they look great. Besides all the benefits, I mean, you look at those, I think that's Grove Street in Downers, is that where that project is that you guys showed? I mean, that's beautiful. It's pedestrian friendly. I love the comment about slowing down the traffic. You know, a lot of these streets that have flooding are dealing with cut through, as we said, the cut through Jewel. So you kill a lot of birds with one stone, and I think there's just so many positives here. Just the funding, that's the key.
And some of this can even be tied into some of the road money too. It can be piggybacked together and work hand in hand.
That would have been a question that I was going to bring up later, is as we go through these priorities, are any of these things where we were going to do the streets, and could we tie some of these initiatives that are being presented at the same time?
Absolutely.
And because we are going to be fixing some of the streets, and yeah, I'd like to implement some of this as part of that program now.
It could be. We've even asked that in some of the meetings we had.
And I think it probably will be on Steve's direction, but I would assume, you know, and I think we need to be very diligent that we don't rebuild a road and then find out a year later that this is one that we're going to come back and do pavers on. You know, so I think that again will be, you know.
Two in design right now, so this is actually a very, you know, a good point. And, you know, if we're doing it tonight or if we're doing it soon, feedback on that being the direction would be very useful. You've got, you know, South Cumner that's currently in design for reconstruction. That's already been, you know, awarded to a consultant, but if we have to, you know, get into new areas, we need to do that too. And the consultant that was looking at the green initiatives really has a very village-wide, but if not village-wide, still very large territory. That it works better the bigger the area that you include in it. And you know, as far as the comments about North Warwick, it certainly could help. It won't eliminate it, but I think it could do a lot of help. So there's a lot of asset to it, but it all has to be, that process is time-consuming too.
Is there an example of the porous asphalt around here?
There is porous concrete, I believe, in alleys and Park, if I remember right. There are people using porous pavements. The brick paver is just one methodology that, you know, that's a good point. But when you saw, like Mr. Fleck, and he was showing the cross sections, it's more than just the pavement, the whole base of the road, the whole understructure, and how much of that you need to go to, all has to be designed. And it's, you know, 90% of the system is, you can't see, it's underneath the pavement.
Right. Well, like the porous asphalt, for example, is brought up as something new, if it's new to this area, you know, obviously, because years ago, we talked to, you know, a brick paving contractor and the beauty of that and how that would all work with stormwater and parking lots. And you want to make sure that it holds up in this climate, and you want to make sure that it's functioning and cost-effective that way. But the porous asphalt, if it's been tested in this area and lasting.
I think George has an
As I said, George, come on up.
I think the reason you see the brick pavers mostly around here is because the Morton Arboretum was the first one that I know of that built it, and now people can go there and see it and see that it works. And they must remove the snow off this parking lot, and it doesn't seem to wreck the parking lot or anything. So I think having some experience, 10 years of experience with that particular type of permeable pavement is why people are going with it around here. And it looks nice too. But I think if we're doing some kind of a pilot project, maybe porous asphalt would be attractive too.
Are you aware of that anywhere in this area, though?
I don't know of any in our immediate area.
I'm going to check, Bruce, but I think Warrenville might have done a street with some porous.
On Warrenville Road?
Somewhere.
On
I
Warrenville
remember
Road, it
their
was brick
clerk
pavers.
saying they were,
Warrenville Road did a permeable paver system, just like we showed you here tonight,
Oh,
not
okay,
a
not a
permeable
concrete
asphalt.
or asphalt.
Yeah, the difference is the permeable pavers are individual pieces of
Right.
concrete that are very, very strong, very durable. Actually, they're poured to a higher PSI than what you would get on a patio or a sidewalk. Incredibly durable, long-lasting, much harder concrete. And then when they're all pieced together, the way they're designed is they all float and move in a system and can flex with the ground and not come apart and maintain their structural integrity. The porous asphalt, and Steve probably could comment on this, it's a continuous layer of asphalt. And with our freeze-thaw cycles, you're probably going to get a tremendous amount of cracking coming through that, where the permeable pavers move and flex.
right.
I would also just add that it requires a different level of maintenance too. So whether it's porous asphalt or porous concrete, where with the bricks, the void areas is between the bricks and they're a little bit bigger, but with the porous pavements, you have a continuous span of that porosity, and you do have to be diligent in vacuuming that out. So instead of sweeping with brooms, you sweep with the vacuum. It would require different equipment. Not that couldn't be handled, it's just different considerations, but a good product as well. It's the system more that we should be thinking about tonight.
Any other trustees? Steve, you want to conclude?
I mean, everything that's been said, I couldn't agree with more. I'm glad the board is very receptive to all the recommendations. As we expected, this is a lot. I mean, this was months for us to dig into. We don't expect you to soak it all up in one night, so I definitely understand that. I appreciate the fact how the entire board wants the committee to keep going, keep the steam going, to hold our feet to the fire. I think this is a real good example, as Trustee Scott said, of good government working for the people. This is attacking a big problem. This is what it takes. This is hard work. It's time consuming. It's not going to get done as quick as we want, but we got the best people here to get it done. So I couldn't have a better group to work with, and we're going to do a good job for you guys. So thanks again for the opportunity.
It's water has no boundary. And so this is everyone's problem. You may be in one part of town that doesn't flood. I think we've seen year after year, just gets worse. And every area could be. So when we do the funding, we start talking about it, it has to be everybody in the community that's involved. In that one.
Water's everybody's problem.
You bet.
Yeah. If not, I do have to say, from my standpoint, I'm extremely honored that I had the opportunity to be the one to say I appointed this committee, because
Amen.
Tremendous amount of work, and I think everything that you have done and recommended is moving us in the right direction. And I tend to agree with everybody. We cannot let this sit, and we have to keep moving on it. So, and I think right away, November the 14th, it'll be on the agenda, and hopefully we start addressing these and we make some board action. So again, I want to thank everybody. It was a tremendous amount of work, but it was professionally presented to us tonight, and I am very impressed with everybody and everyone who did anything involved with this. So again, thank you. And I'll move on to miscellaneous, or any miscellaneous items on the agenda, I think. Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Addington.
Second, Scott.
Motion been made, second to adjourn. Roll call, please.
Trustee Addington.
Yes.
Trustee Barry.
Yes.
Trustee Scott.
Yes.
Trustee Barker.
Yes.
Trustee Nero.
Yes.
Again, thank everybody for coming this evening. It's very, very educational. Meeting adjourned.